Welcome to the podcast about investing in startups, where existing investors can learn how to get the best deal possible. And those that have never before invested in startups can learn the keys to success from the venture experts. Your host is Nick Moran, and this is The Full Ratchet.
Welcome back to TFR for a special installment of Investor Stories. In this segment, the investors tell a story about some of the most odd and unusual situations they've ever encountered as investors. This is the segment called The Strange and Unusual. On today's special segment, we have Leah Solivan of Fuel Capital. Leah, what's the strangest, most unusual, or most memorable startup pitch you've received?
We've definitely met with founders before where we thought we were on an episode of Silicon Valley. There was a founder one time that came in, and I swear he was pitching us Piper Chat. Like it was Pied Piper all over again. And we were just sort of confused. Like, is someone punking us right now? But there was no mention that it was similar to the HBO show or that the product was similar. But we left that meeting and we're like, did we just hear the pitch for Piper Chat? So that was kind of a funny one.
On today's special segment, we have Kane Hsieh of Root Ventures. Kane, can you tell us a story about the craziest situation or pitch you've encountered?
Someone sent me like a 60-page deck of like 10 different perpetual motion machines he had proposed. And it was, I'll admit, I looked through all of it, mostly out of like sheer fascination, because it was like, there was a lot of work put into this. And again, this is where I made the mistake where, I figured he'd put a lot of effort in, so I should at least put some effort in and at least say, hey, like, here's some of the critical failure points. That was the mistake, because now he randomly emails me and he's still upset, and I should have just blocked the email. But, perpetual motion is the gift that keeps on giving, literally.
On today's special segment, we have Richard Kerby of Equal Ventures. Richard, can you tell us a story about the craziest situation or pitch you've encountered?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I guess the strangest pitch that comes to mind right now was when a founder was giving his pitch. He was standing up in our conference room, walking around, explaining his business, answering questions. And he eventually went to the whiteboard to kind of draw, his version of the status quo and the future out. And then all of a sudden, he just gets down on one knee, like as if he was a quarterback, like relaying the play to his offense, and proceeds to just continue his pitch on that one knee, answering questions and kind of continue on his process. And that just, to me, was quite strange to see someone down on one knee, either in proposal stage or or in the like, hey, linemen, receivers, running backs, here's the play coming in. And so that was a very, very different way to try and get an investor to kind of get on your side there.
He stayed on the knee for the duration of the meeting?
Probably not the full duration, but he was there long enough that once the meeting ended, the first thing we all discussed was, did you see that guy get on his knee? He was on his knee for a long time.
All right.
I was going to say, sometimes, Nick, I think founders want to be differentiating, do things differently. And sometimes, I think investors want differentiation, but not different. And that was different.
That's good. On today's special segment, we have James Currier of NFX. James, can you talk about the strangest, most unusual, or most memorable pitch you've ever received?
So I guess I don't really have a great answer to that. I will tell you two experiences I had getting pitches that really stand out for me. One was quite positive and one was quite negative. One was when there was a guy who was pitching the whole partnership, not at my firm, but at Battery, and he was losing them. And I could see that he was losing them, and he figured out that he was losing them. So he got up out of his chair and he walked over to the managing partner right next to him, and he knelt down next to him with his elbows on the table, the big conference room table. And he was 2.5 feet away, face to face. And he just looked at him and was so intense. And he was so certain of himself and so passionate about this that it shocked the partners back into paying attention, and we eventually did the deal. But he had been losing them prior to that. He was going through a script, he was going through his PowerPoint, whatever it was, but he realized that he needed to make a human connection. And he figured out who in the room he needed to address. And he made that human connection. And that reinvigorated their interest, reinvigorated more meetings. And eventually, through logic, the battery made the investment. I was an associate at the time.
Was there a verbal plea with the kneeling, or?
No, it was just an intensity. There was no kneeling to be supplicating to please give me money. It was kneeling to say, I am dead serious about this. Like, I am all in. My body's in on this. My mind's in. My heart's in on this thing.
Wow.
And it was very powerful. He wasn't supplicating. He wasn't being a beta. He was being an alpha right in the face of the managing partner. I've always remembered that. And on the NFX website, there's a whole post and a whole series of videos sort of coaching people on pitching. And it talks about this. It talks about pitching from your stomach. Don't pitch from your head. Pitch from your gut.
Do you remember how that startup worked out?
I don't actually. And I might have been at HBS and then on to my own startup by the time we would have even known how it worked out. So I don't recall tracking it. And the other memory I have of a really interesting pitch was where the founder really was interested in raising money, and he wouldn't leave the room. And I got up, I picked up my laptop. He didn't leave his chair. He kept talking. And I then left the room and I was standing outside the door and he kept talking and he wouldn't leave. And it was getting really uncomfortable. It was sort of a low EQ moment for him. And then also a moment for me where I realized that the disappointment that people can feel from not getting funding when they need it so badly, when they want it so badly, and they're trying to figure out how to get it and what to do and what they're doing wrong. And the frustration that I had when I was fundraising sometimes for a couple of my companies that was harder than some of the others. And it made me feel like we have to be careful in communicating with founders now that I'm on this side of the table, because from a lot of their perspectives, we have the power because we have the capital. And for the 2% of the top founders, they have the power and all the VCs are trying to get into them. But 98% of the time, the founders are really trying hard to get their capital. And we just have to be very, very careful about how we communicate with them and how they communicate with us and how we communicate with each other about them, because there needs to be respect. There needs to be an understanding of the difficulty these people face in these moments and their disappointment. And I wish there was some way of really communicating to founders. You have to bring 100% every day, but you also have to understand the probabilities. The probabilities of getting funded from NFX is 0.3%. We fund between 0.2% and 0.3% of the companies that we meet with. So when you come into the meeting, when you come to pitch, like, you got to understand those numbers. You still have to do it. Like, it's not rational, because why would you do something where you have a 0.2% chance of it working? You wouldn't, but you have to do that, and you have to do it. That's why we built these software tools to help people find the right fit. So that'll go from 0.2% to 5% or 2% or something more reasonable than 0.2 or 0.3%. So I wish founders just understood the probabilities, and I wish founders would take the time to use venture capitalists as free consultants. We see a lot of deals. We see a lot of things. We have a lot of knowledge in our head that the founders are building up for hours and hours and hours. And they after years of study and knowledge, they dump all of that knowledge on us in a half an hour meeting. We've got all that stuff in our head. You can mine it if you're a founder. Don't come in always just looking for the money. Come in looking for the knowledge, because if you have the knowledge, the money's going to find you. And everybody's so intent on just getting the money. They should be focused on getting the information, getting the knowledge.
That will conclude this installment of Investor Stories. If you're enjoying the program and would like to see it continue, take a moment and leave a 5-star review in iTunes. Also, if you'd like updates on new content from TFR, as well as the top 10 VC articles every week, go to fullratchet.net and sign up for the newsletter. Okay, that will wrap things up for today. Until next time, over-prepare, choose carefully, and invest confidently. Thanks for joining me.